Crime is terrifying, but even more frightening are the criminals who are too intelligent. Those who not only dare to commit brutal acts, but also know how to conceal them with sophisticated tricks. They are not anonymous. They are individuals with deep knowledge and skills, making investigations extremely difficult. These individuals often have the ability to predict and calculate every step of law enforcement. As a result, they create perfect schemes to deceive, confuse, and buy time to cover up their crimes. This puts society in a situation where it faces hidden threats that are sometimes difficult to detect early. When greed, jealousy, or hatred flares up, they can turn ordinary people into cold-blooded criminals. These perpetrators are willing to sacrifice everything to fulfill their personal motives, regardless of the consequences. The battle between good and evil has become fiercer than ever. Law enforcement agencies not only face ordinary crimes, but also engage in a battle of wits with individuals possessing superior intelligence and sophisticated concealment skills. Today's case is proof of this, not just because of the brutality of the perpetrator, but also due to the way they covered up their crime. Horrifying discovery at an abandoned warehouse. On the early morning of January 10th, 2017, Mr. Wong, a 45-year-old scrap collector, was pushing his small cart along a deserted alleyway in the outskirts of Daheng District, Yunnan Province, China. He was familiar with every corner of this area. On his usual route stood an abandoned warehouse. That day, as he approached it, he sensed something was off. The rusted iron door was slightly ajar, and a strange, foul odor wafted out, grabbing his attention. His curiosity and years of experience urged him to investigate. As he touched the door, the faint morning light seeped into the dark room, revealing a horrifying scene. Amidst the trash and debris lay a frail, pale body, motionless. Mr. Wong's hands went cold, and his blood seemed to freeze. It was the body of a woman, her black hair matted, clothes torn, and her body covered in numerous wounds. He staggered back in panic, his hands trembling as he reached for his phone to call the police. When the police arrived at the scene, they found the body inside the dilapidated warehouse, deep in a remote area more than 2 kilometers from the nearest residential zone. The rusted iron door creaked as it opened. The air inside was damp and putrid, like a dungeon. The weak beams of the investigators' flashlights pierced through thick dust, revealing splatters of blood on the cold concrete floor. The victim lay on the warehouse floor in a position of immense agony. Her body bore severe injuries, signs of brutal torture. Her hands were tightly bound with dry rope, leaving bruises and dried blood around her wrists. Her face was pale, one cheek swollen, lips cracked, and dried blood clung to the corners of her mouth. Her eyes were tightly shut as if trying to escape a horrifying reality. Her body was mottled with bruises, particularly deep cuts likely made by a knife or sharp metal blade, leaving angry red gashes. Her fingers were broken and twisted to the side, as if snapped during torture. Around the body, police found clear evidence that this was where the victim had been held captive and tortured for days. Broken glass shards and blood stains were scattered everywhere, signs of desperate struggle. Strands of black hair clung to the debris. Nearby, a broken chair lay overturned, its armrest smeared with blood. Based on the state of decomposition and the wounds on the body, forensic experts estimated that the victim had died approximately 2 to 3 days prior. The cold warehouse temperature slowed decomposition, but the stench of decay was beginning to permeate the room. The severe wounds, especially the deep cuts and signs of strangulation, indicated that she had endured her final moments in excruciating pain and sheer terror, tortured to death in utter despair and loneliness. Victim's identity and initial police hypothesis. The police quickly secured the scene and began gathering evidence. They collected hair samples, rope fibers, and other physical traces for investigation. However, identifying the victim remained the top priority. Using basic forensic methods such as fingerprinting and preliminary DNA analysis, the forensic team hoped to achieve quick results. Not long after images of the body and initial information were broadcast, the police received a call from a family reporting the disappearance of Lu Xing, a 26-year-old woman who had lost contact with her family 3 days prior. Fingerprint results from the scene matched Lu Xing's records, confirming her identity as the victim. Lu Xing, 26, was a beautiful young woman working in the tourism industry. She was known for her lively demeanor, optimistic spirit, and dedication to her work. Born into a modest family, Lu Xing never allowed her circumstances to hold her back. She worked hard, always striving to lift her family out of economic hardship. Lu Xing's family lived in a small neighborhood in Daheng, where her parents toiled to support their 3 children. As the eldest daughter, Lu Xing did not shy away from challenges. From her early days in the tourism industry, she continuously learned and worked diligently. To her friends and colleagues, Lu Xing was kind and approachable, always ready to help others, whether by sharing work experiences or offering a listening ear. With clients, Lu Xing was always attentive and considerate, ensuring comfort on every trip she organized. Her gentle and sincere nature made her death an enormous shock to those who knew her. No one could believe that such a resilient young woman could be brutally murdered. After confirming Lu Xing's identity, the police delved deeper into the case. One notable detail was that she disappeared 3 days earlier without any prior indication. This led police to believe the crime had been meticulously planned rather than a random act. Lu Xing's profession as a tour guide meant she interacted with many people, from colleagues to clients. These complex relationships could harbor motives for the crime, such as jealousy, blind love, or personal conflict. However, her family and friends insisted that Lu Xing was private about her romantic life. Consequently, police expanded their investigation, not ruling out the possibility that she had been stalked or was the target of a sinister plot. Based on evidence at the scene, police suspected Lu Xing had been kidnapped and held captive in the warehouse for at least 2 to 3 days before being killed. The severe torture marks on her body indicated the perpetrator not only intended to kill her but also to inflict brutal suffering. This suggested the murderer had a strong personal motive driven by hatred, possessiveness, or revenge. Signs of struggle and scattered blood stains indicated Lu Xing fought back. Faint footprints in the thick dust and broken glass shards hinted at a final confrontation between her and the assailant. These elements helped police piece together the scenario. The murderer used violence to subdue and torture Lu Xing before ruthlessly killing her. However, the most puzzling aspect for the police remained why the perpetrator chose this warehouse to imprison and kill the victim. The area was remote, rarely visited, and had been abandoned for years. Not everyone would know about the warehouse's existence, leading to the theory that the murderer was a local who had thoroughly studied the area before committing the crime. Victim's family testimony and the ransom kidnapping plot. The police expanded their investigation, hoping to gather more clues from security cameras near the warehouse. They reviewed footage from cameras installed at intersections and along roads leading to the remote area. However, their efforts seemed futile. Most cameras were damaged or non-functional during the period of Lu Xing's disappearance. Even the working cameras failed to capture any images of the victim or suspicious vehicles related to the case. The lack of clues from the camera system made the investigation more challenging. Police turned to questioning residents living near the warehouse. Although the area was remote, a few households lived several kilometers apart. The investigation focused on gathering information about unfamiliar people, suspicious vehicles, or unusual sounds in the area. However, most residents stated they had not noticed anything unusual in the days prior. The area was typically quiet with little traffic, so they hadn't paid attention to anything out of the ordinary. The only witness was Mr. Wong, who discovered the body, but he could only provide information from the morning of January 10th. Before that, he, like everyone else, had not noticed anything suspicious. On the afternoon of January 10th, the victim's family painfully recounted that, before Lu Xing's body was discovered, they had received a mysterious photo from an anonymous account. The photo was sent 2 days earlier, coinciding with the time Lu Xing went missing. In the photo, Lu Xing was tightly bound, her face filled with fear, and her body covered in scratches. This deeply worried the family. Initially, they had assumed she was on a work trip as usual. Due to her job in the tourism industry, Lu Xing frequently traveled and was often away from home for days. Therefore, when she didn't return on January 7th, the family wasn't immediately concerned. It was only after receiving the horrifying photo along with a ransom message that they realized she was in danger. The perpetrator demanded a large sum of money and warned the family not to contact the police, threatening Lu Xing's life if they did. In a state of panic, the family tried to contact Lu Xing, but her phone was off. The silence heightened their fear. Lacking the money to pay the ransom and afraid that involving the police would worsen the situation, they chose to remain silent and refrained from taking drastic action. This detail indicated that the perpetrator was intelligent and cautious, exploiting the family's fear to extort them without leaving a trace. His cruelty and calculated approach made the case more complex and heartbreaking than ever. Sophisticated methods of erasing evidence and suspect profile. The anonymous account used by the perpetrator could not be traced, and the photo sent also could not be sourced. The perpetrator left no clear clue that could lead back to them, even after the murder. This demonstrated careful planning and a frightening level of cunning, from the ransom demand to hiding the victim's body in the abandoned warehouse. Everything was executed according to a calculated plan. The police questioned the true motive behind the perpetrator's actions. Was the ransom the primary goal, or was it merely a diversion? Did the perpetrator know the victim and her family, or did they randomly choose Lu Xing to fulfill their dark scheme? The evidence at the scene pointed to prolonged and brutal torture. The act of torturing the victim before killing her indicated that this was not a simple ransom case. The perpetrator likely harbored personal hatred or deeper psychological motives. The police asked the victim's family to provide the phone that received the message and the photo from the perpetrator. In a tense atmosphere, Lu Xing's father, his hands trembling, handed over an old phone to the investigator. They opened a series of messages from the anonymous account, which consisted of a string of strange numbers with threatening content. "Your daughter is in my hands. If you want her to live, prepare a large sum of money. Do not contact the police, or you will never see her again." Attached to the message was the horrifying photo. In the image, Lu Xing was tightly bound to a broken chair, coarse ropes digging into her wrists and ankles. Her eyes were wide with terror, as if pleading for help. Her tangled black hair fell across her pale face, marred with scratches and streaks of dried blood on her cheeks and mouth. Her clothes were torn and muddied. The dim light in the photo suggested it was taken in a dark, hidden location. The investigator zoomed in on the image to find the smallest details. They noted the peeling, rusty wall in the background, reminiscent of an abandoned warehouse. The lighting seemed to come from an artificial source, possibly a small lamp. The surroundings indicated that Lu Xing had been held captive in a harsh, squalid environment and had endured prolonged torture. The perpetrator communicated through short but clearly threatening messages. In the next message, they demanded a specific ransom amount but did not provide details about how the transaction would occur. This reflected the perpetrator's caution and meticulous planning. They warned the family not to contact the police, threatening dire consequences if they did. Comparing the state of the body with the photo, the police found a perfect match. From the position of the wounds to the background details, they were confident that the location in the photo was the abandoned warehouse where the body was found. The investigation team worked with technology experts to trace the phone number and the photo. However, the results were disappointing. All attempts to extract digital traces, such as the photo's location data, GPS information, or details about the messaging account, yielded no leads. The messages were sent through an anonymous service using paid encryption, leaving no information about the sender's identity. Even the photo lacked EXIF data, which is typically present when taken with a phone or digital camera. This led the police to realize that the perpetrator was not only careful but also highly knowledgeable about information technology. The thoroughness in erasing all digital traces indicated that the perpetrator had meticulously removed every piece of technical evidence that most people would overlook. This raised significant suspicion among the investigators. The perpetrator was not only cunning but possibly had specialized knowledge in information technology. It was likely they worked in fields related to IT security, encryption, or data handling. The perpetrator knew how to hide all potential traces, from erasing GPS data, using a VPN to remain anonymous, to potentially using external devices to send messages from different locations to mislead the investigation. These techniques required expertise and experience in IT. Based on this analysis, the police speculated that the perpetrator might work in fields such as cybersecurity or programming. Only someone from this industry could carefully eliminate all evidence in this manner. To aid the investigation, the police contacted top cybersecurity experts to analyze the methods used by the perpetrator. They hoped to trace the anonymous services, VPNs, and other tools to find even the smallest weakness. However, as of now, the investigation had yielded no breakthroughs. The perpetrator's calculated and well-executed plan led the police to suspect that they might have prior knowledge of investigations like this. Additionally, the investigation team began reviewing records of similar cases where criminals had used advanced technology to evade capture. They hoped to identify patterns or connections between cases. Simultaneously, the police scrutinized individuals with technological expertise in the area, including colleagues and friends of the victim who worked in IT, programming, cybersecurity, or telecommunications. The victim's relationships and the first suspects. On January 11th, while reviewing the victim's personal relationships, the police discovered crucial information. Liu Xing had a boyfriend named Wu Pei, a 28-year-old who worked in the IT industry. Those who knew him described Wu Pei as handsome and chivalrous, but with a rather puzzling and sometimes unstable personality. Some of Liu Xing's friends shared their distrust of Wu Pei, despite his attractive appearance. An even more surprising revelation came when the police investigated Liu Xing's romantic history. They found out that her ex-boyfriend, Zhen Huan, also 28, worked in the IT field. Unlike Wu Pei, Zhen Huan was described as calm, gentle, and sincere in his relationships. This discovery further complicated the case. The police learned that Wu Pei and Zhen Huan were once close colleagues. Having worked together at a local tech company, their relationship was once strong, but for unknown reasons, they lost contact. This information led the investigation team to consider the possibility that this complex love triangle might be connected to Liu Xing's death. Could this be the motive behind the murder? Or was there an even deeper secret within their relationships? These questions posed a significant challenge for the investigation team. The police quickly investigated the alibis of both Wu Pei and Zhen Huan. During questioning, both provided relatively convincing statements. However, when compared with timelines and other evidence, nothing was strong enough to fully clear them of suspicion. Wu Pei claimed that on the day Liu Xing went missing, he was working from home on an IT project. However, no one could confirm his statement since he worked alone. He lacked clear alibis such as transaction receipts, security camera footage, or witnesses. This made it impossible for the police to eliminate him from the list of suspects. Despite his calm and cooperative demeanor during questioning, Wu Pei maintained an odd distance. revealing little emotion or information beyond the basics. Zhenhuan also failed to provide a concrete alibi. He stated that he spent the time walking and reading at a familiar cafe. However, when police checked the cafe, no one remembered seeing him during that period. His statement lacked credibility, making him another person of interest. The absence of clear alibis for both suspects posed significant challenges for the investigation. The complicated relationships between Wu Pei, Zhenhuan, and the victim made the case even more convoluted. Both had potential motives and opportunities to approach Lu Xing. However, no definitive evidence existed to charge either of them, leaving the police at an impasse. As the investigation neared a dead end, the pressure from Lu Xing's family and public opinion grew. All the clues seemed fragmented and impossible to piece together. But then, a glimmer of hope emerged from the anonymous photo sent to the victim's family. The image contained more information than initially thought and could be the key to unlocking a new direction in the case. Case breakthrough from the reflection in the victim's eyes. The police brought in technology experts to analyze the photo in greater detail. Using advanced imaging technology, they zoomed in and clarified every detail. After hours of relentless work, on January 12th, a shocking discovery emerged. Hidden deep within the victim's eyes was a faint reflection. It was an image of a person standing close to her when the photo was taken. This detail sent chills through everyone. The victim's eyes had inadvertently become the final witness to the crime. Initially, the reflection was too blurry to identify, but thanks to high-level digital image analysis, the investigation team gradually reconstructed the face of a man reflected in the victim's pupil. As the image became clearer, a figure with a slightly turned face, tall and slender build, and part of his clothing became visible. This description eerily matched Wu Pei. This revelation completely changed the course of the investigation, proving that Wu Pei was present at the scene and very close to the victim in her final moments before the photo was taken. The police were stunned by the perpetrator's sophistication. He had meticulously planned every detail, from hiding the victim's phone, using anonymous accounts, to erasing all obvious traces. Yet a tiny detail in the victim's eyes became his undoing, leading the police to their most critical clue. Following this discovery, Wu Pei officially became the focus of the investigation. While the police did not yet have enough evidence to charge him immediately, the reflection in the victim's eyes marked a significant breakthrough in the case. The investigation team began closely monitoring Wu Pei, gathering additional evidence related to him. They also reached out to people who knew Wu Pei to learn more about his relationship with the victim. Digging deeper into Wu Pei's personal life could be the key to unraveling this convoluted case. Fake account on personal computer. The perpetrator unmasked. On January 13th, the police, after obtaining the necessary legal permissions, searched Wu Pei's phone and personal computer. They hoped to find critical clues to solve the case. During the data analysis, investigators uncovered highly incriminating information on Wu Pei's computer. They found notes detailing how to create anonymous online accounts and sophisticated methods for concealing digital activity. These documents demonstrated that Wu Pei had meticulously prepared his plan. Notably, a file with detailed instructions on using encryption software and VPNs to mask IP addresses when accessing the internet further strengthened police suspicions. In the list of recently visited websites, the team found several suspicious addresses linked to illegal online activities. It was highly likely that Wu Pei had used these to prepare for his crime. Furthermore, investigators discovered several anonymous messages sent from a fake account by Wu Pei. The contents of these messages contained threats similar to those received by the victim's family before the crime. When all the evidence was combined, the investigation team concluded that Wu Pei was the perpetrator. His skill in covering his tracks and his technological knowledge had made it difficult for the police to identify him. But now, with clear evidence in hand, They were ready to confront him decisively. A firm decision was made. Wu Pei could not be allowed to escape the grasp of justice. The police were determined to confront him and make him pay for his crimes. At the police station, Wu Pei sat upright, wearing a confident and cold expression, believing his plan was flawless and that no one could connect the dots. He was convinced that his meticulous preparation and anonymity had effectively concealed his crime. However, as each piece of evidence was presented to him, Wu Pei began to panic, losing his initial composure. The secrets he had tried so hard to hide were now exposed. His motives, jealousy, and a twisted psychological state had fueled his brutal actions. In the end, faced with undeniable evidence, Wu Pei finally bowed his head and confessed. The origin of the crime and the plan for revenge. As the victim's new boyfriend, Wu Pei always lived under the shadow of her ex-boyfriend, Zhen Huan, someone Lu Xing had never truly forgotten. The constant praise of Zhen Huan and the inadvertent comparisons that labeled Zhen Huan as better or kinder deeply wounded Wu Pei's pride and ego. Even during intimate moments, Lu Xing would sometimes accidentally call out her ex's name, pushing Wu Pei's jealousy to an unbearable limit. What seemed like harmless words didn't just hurt Wu Pei. They transformed into a fierce anger and uncontrollable jealousy. For him, the humiliation lay not only in being inferior to Zhen Huan emotionally, but also in facing Lu Xing's family, who often mistook him for her ex. Each mistaken glance and every comparison poured fuel on the smoldering fire of envy and resentment inside him. Wu Pei felt that no matter how hard he tried, he could never fully win Lu Xing's heart. This sense of failure weighed heavily on his mind. Furthermore, his work in the IT field, which required precision, came with intense stress and pressure, destabilizing his already fragile mental state. The pressures of work and his personal life pushed him into extreme tension. In his weakest moments, rage and jealousy exploded, driving him to plan a ruthless act of revenge. He didn't just want to torment Lu Xing. He wanted her family to experience the deepest agony. The anonymous calls and horrifying photos sent to her family were not merely for ransom. They were designed to torture them with fear and despair. During the preparation for his malicious plan, Wu Pei continued to play the role of a caring and attentive boyfriend. He cleverly concealed his jealousy and inner madness, maintaining a perfect facade so that Lu Xing would not suspect anything. He closely observed her words and actions, understanding her psychology and emotions, making her feel safe and secure in his presence. On the day Lu Xing was preparing for a tour, Wu Pei invited her out, pretending to take her for a ride before her departure. While they were in the car, he had a dose of sedative ready. Taking advantage of an unguarded moment, he quickly covered her nose and mouth, rendering her unconscious. Immediately after, he took her to an abandoned warehouse, a place almost entirely cut off from the outside world. A series of crimes in the abandoned warehouse. In the gloomy, cold space of the warehouse on January 7th, Wu Pei assaulted Lu Xing. For him, this was not just an act of brutality, but a twisted satisfaction for the hatred he had harbored for so long. Her screams echoed through the empty warehouse, but no one heard. In the days that followed, Wu Pei escalated his cruelty. At first, he thought keeping Lu Xing in a state of fear and helplessness was enough to punish her. But the feeling of power and control turned him into someone even more ruthless. On January 8th, he moved to the next phase of his sinister plan. Wu Pei didn't just torture Lu Xing mentally, he extended his torment to her family. Using her hidden personal phone, cloaked through layers of security, he took chilling images of Lu Xing. The photos captured her in a state of complete helplessness, bound to an old wooden chair in the abandoned warehouse. To maximize the family's fear, he deliberately took photos from angles that highlighted the abuse and torture, the bruises on her arms, the rope marks cutting into her wrists, and Lu Xing's terrified, pained expression were evidence of the cruelty she endured. Each photo was a damning testament to Wu Pei's sadistic acts. After gathering enough images, Wu Pei employed his extensive knowledge of information technology to anonymize his actions. He used encryption tools and high-level VPN software to erase his digital footprint, creating anonymous accounts on social media and secure messaging services. He sent the photos and videos to Lu Xing's family without leaving a trace, to ensure no one could track his IP address or real location. Wu Pei set up a chain of international VPNs passing through multiple countries. This made it nearly impossible for the police to trace his actions. Each message he sent was a calculated blow. Knowing Lu Xing's family would be haunted by images of their daughter in agony and despair, Wu Pei wanted not just to instill fear, but to demonstrate his absolute power. His ransom demands, coupled with threats, kept the family paralyzed with fear. In each message, he emphasized that Lu Xing's time was running out, intensifying their panic and helplessness. On January 9th, when he received no response from the victim's family, Wu Pei grew angry and frustrated that his plan wasn't unfolding as intended. His fury erupted into more violence toward Lu Xing, no longer driven solely by jealousy. His frustration over the plan's failure fueled his rage. He felt that Lu Xing's body had become tainted, and he no longer wished to assault her. But his anger had spiraled out of control. In a moment of impulsive fury, he beat Lu Xing mercilessly. His final blows caused her to stop breathing. At that moment, he realized he had gone too far. He had killed the woman he once loved. After a brief silence, he was gripped by fear and regret over his horrific crime. But greed and hatred drove him to continue covering up his deeds. The final verdict and an unforgettable haunting. At the trial on January 20th, Wu Pei was sentenced to death for murder involving torture and the use of advanced technology in his crime. This case was not just a tragedy about the death of a young woman, but a heart-wrenching indictment of the collapse of love and trust. It raised harrowing questions about the darkness within the human soul, where jealousy and twisted psychology could lead to unimaginable cruelty. Lu Xing's final moments, reflected in her eyes filled with panic and pain, leave us with an overwhelming sense of anger and sorrow. The victim's family not only lost a loved one, but now live with the haunting memory of what happened. They became secondary victims of the crime, bearing an unending grief. Though justice was served, it could never fill the void left in their hearts by her death. What are your thoughts on the perpetrator in today's case? Leave your comments below to discuss with us. Don't forget to like and subscribe to Decoder Box to never miss thrilling cases from around the world. Goodbye, and see you in our next video.